Is Penn State a threat to Michigan and Ohio State? This one is more controversial. But like with Oregon, I'm going to say yes, they are. And the reason for that is a little different than Oregon. Because while Oregon, I give them as a threat because of really just the overall talent they have at every position. Like Oregon, I kid you not, has one of the highest ceilings in all of college football. The fact that, Brett McMurphy of Action Network has them ranked number 1 and people were laughing at that. To a little bit, I got to confess, I thought, a little bit of a bold move there, but it's possible. I can see that happening clearly. Don't even need glasses. I would need glasses. In fact, I'd need a microscope to see Penn State as the nation's best team occurring. It's possible. In fact, I have Penn State with a ceiling of winning the national championship, but I have a much easier time seeing Oregon achieve that level of success. And with Penn State, when I factor that in, it's because of their defense, it's because of Andy Kotelnicki, and it's also because of the fact that with the 12-team playoff, you're not going to see the TCU Cinderella story or the Boise State of old, that type of stuff, but you could see like kind of a Walmart Cinderella story where a team that is top 4 or top 5, top 6 that has depth that could play on the level of the nation's best team any given Saturday, that they survive and advance, and let's say the teams that match up well with them or the number 1 team goes down in an upset to another good team in the semifinals or second round, and then they just advance on and win it all. That's kind of what I would see with Penn State. Though they do have the talent to be the nation's best team, it is possible. Again, just not as possible as Oregon in my mind, or as possible as Ohio State. With Michigan and Penn State are kind of in that boat where they match up very well with the nation's best teams because of their defensive line play, especially with Michigan due to their reputation and development on the offensive line. Penn State's recruited well on the offensive line too, so they could bust that out as a non-negotiable this year even with their losses. They're teams that punch well above their weight in terms of talent, and I think that James Franklin, as I've already discussed, is going to break through this year due to the fact that he's a good head coach. I don't think he's elite, near elite, or even great, but he's good. And he's built an elite staff. I think that's something James Franklin's actually good at doing, is building a staff that is one of the best in college football. And he has that this season, much like he did in 2017. And with the talent that Penn State returns, they bring back about 70% of their production, similar to Oregon and Ohio State. I think that they can make some noise, and I think they will. But let's play devil's advocate. Devil's advocate says that James Franklin cannot win a big game, that it's ultimately impossible. It's not going to happen. He is, he's only won 3 games against teams that finished inside of the top 10. And he has over 20 losses against teams inside of the top 10. He is winless against Ohio State and Michigan post-COVID. He is winless against Michigan teams or Ohio State teams since the Ryan Day era began that are inside of the top 10. He just, quite frankly, can't win a big game to save his life. He can't do it. So what makes you think that he can break through this season? What makes you think that? That's devil's advocate position number 1. Number 2 is the fact that who are your wide receivers? Julian Fleming's there, sure, but Julian Fleming, newsflash, has never really been healthy. And outside of him, what? Harrison Wallace III? Caden Saunders? And who's the quarterback? I mean, we know that Drew Aller's the quarterback, but who's the great quarterback? Is there a great quarterback? And that's what I'm looking to see. That's what I'm looking at. That's what the college football world is looking at. And that's the non-negotiable. I hope you see why it's, I think, obvious that Oregon has the higher ceiling than Penn State. Another non-negotiable for Penn State. This is third. Oregon has won. I think Michigan, and I didn't mean non-negotiable, sorry. This is the devil's advocate position. Penn State is 3. Michigan, I think, has like 2, maybe 3. Oregon has 1, maybe 2 if you want to split the defensive line from the potential lack of physicality. Ohio State only has, 1 or 2. When you look at, with Penn State, wide receiver, quarterback, and then with James Franklin, that right there is 3. Another one's the offensive line. And I would even say the defensive line, perhaps, because Penn State last year had a pretty damn good defensive line, but they were not at the level of Michigan. And there's a very good argument that it was an inflated defensive line statistically by the fact that against Michigan ran for over 200 yards on them. And against Ohio State, one of the next best rushing offenses they would play, they didn't have Travion Henderson in that game. They were dinged up badly at running back. The Buckeyes were against Penn State. And I think that argument is a little baloney, just a little. There is some truth with it, though, because Michigan did run for over 200 yards on Penn State with basically no passing offense. But overall, I think they were great on the D-line. The question is the O-line, because Penn State lost Olu Fashanu and Caden Wallace. And they also lost center Hunter Norzad. And they had a good offensive line last season, but it was not at the level of Michigan's, especially when you look at Michigan's college football playoff run and the offensive line that they showed out there. It was not at the level of Georgia's O-line or Washington's or Oregon's. And because of Mike Yurcich and James Franklin being Mike Yurcich and James Franklin, I don't think it was a properly utilized offensive line. I think if you took that offensive line and plopped it into Michigan, like all those players and recruits, I think it would have been one of the nation's best, and I think it would have been fairly obvious from that last season. But you look at... Am I live still? I'm live, right? Can you hear me, guys? Can you guys hear me? Can you all hear me? Okay, just making sure because my screen is frozen, so I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't cutting out. But thank you all for responding. Anyway, with with that being said, and I'll get to your super chat, Chris Lane. I saw it. I just wanted to get through this section, and then I'll get to it. Thank you for the $5, by the way. I really appreciate it, and I am gonna get to it. But yeah. I may have to actually get a new Wi-Fi router before the season kicks off, but we'll see about that. So you look at Penn State, and gosh, it's really interesting because, full disclosure, I think Penn State is actually the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, and I think that they'll be better than Oregon for a phrase that takes 2 words: trench play. I think that the combined effectiveness of Penn State and Oregon's trench play, when you average them out, Penn State will be slightly better. And trench play doesn't just factor in this instance, offensive and defensive line. It's mostly that. But it's also, how do the linebackers secure the gaps in the D-line? What's the depth of your unit, not just your starters? how do the running backs and tight ends function with the offensive line? And Oregon has a better offensive line than Penn State by a significant margin. I think it's the same thing for Penn State in favor of their defensive line. But then Penn State has the better linebackers. They have the better tight end. And I don't think they have the better running back individually. I think Jordan James is better than Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. But Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, along with incoming freshman Martin, who looked good in the spring game, and some other players they have, I think they have a deeper running back room than what Oregon does. And in the Big Ten, it's your rushing offense, your rushing defense, it's interior trench play on both sides of the football. Also, Penn State has a better secondary because they return Zakee Wheatley and Kevin Winston Jr. Oregon's main advantage and non-negotiable is their quarterback and wide receivers, along with their offensive line and running back. But as with their defense, there are some questions there. For Michigan, they have questions in their passing offense. For Ohio State, they have questions on their offensive line. Penn State's this weird team in that they have more reasons than any of the three to not believe in them, but they also, outside of wide receiver, do not have this crippling weakness, or even the potential to have a crippling weakness at any position outside of wide receiver. Like Ohio State could be weak enough at O-line, and even quarterback for that matter, that those could be crippling weaknesses. Michigan, wide receiver and quarterback, you could even say their offensive line with the quarterback and running back be as weak as they are, make it so that Michigan's offense is just very ineffective. For Oregon, it's defense. It's the secondary. It could be defensive line and linebacker to where, yes, those units are good, but they can't stop great rushing offenses. And for Penn State, it's wide receiver. It could be quarterback, but come on. With Andy Kotelnicki, Drew Aller is probably going to improve. But still, I'm going to put that as a possible disaster. That's two. Their defense in every position is going to be anywhere from great to elite. The O-line, with how they've recruited and the fact that they return 3 seniors on the interior, and they have a lot of younger players who are blue chippers, they're set for success, in my mind. I think Penn State is absolutely a threat to Michigan and Ohio State. And they don't even play Michigan in the regular season anymore. They play Ohio State at home in Beaver Stadium. And an easy schedule, especially when you're talking about a potential playoff run, is bigger and more important now more than ever. Because you can do what the NFL does. Not in big games, but in some smaller games. Like, it would not shock me at all if in the final game of the regular season against Maryland, Penn State just doesn't start any of their starters. They play backups and probably still beat Maryland by multiple touchdowns. But I do think that Penn State's a threat, just like Oregon is to Michigan and Ohio State. All 4 of those teams are threats to each other. They are all within inches, perhaps millimeters of each other. Perhaps atoms. Is there a gap between my fingers? Anyway, thank you for watching this cut of Touchdown Talk. Remember to like the video to help this channel get into the algorithm and grow as we approach the 2024 season. And also subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you can participate in our giveaway at 20,000 subscribers. Help us to grow, join this awesome community, and also be notified when we release new content here on College Football with Sam. I would like to thank my Patreon members for sponsoring this video and channel. A shout out to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being $25 a month Heisman members. A shout out to $10 a month American members, all American members, Chris Lane, Connor Little OH, and Ismar. And a shout out to $5 all conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell. Have a great day, guys, and we will see you soon. Bye.